Game balance is always one of the hardest and some of the most trickiest topics to talk about when it comes to game design. And for today's critical thought, I want to return to the topic of mobile games, and how some recent games that I've been playing have been struggling when it comes to balancing making things that are interesting to do versus making things that require a checkbook or a mortgage to be taken out in order to accomplish them. Monetization has always been the double-edged sword when it comes to live service design. On one hand, it allows a game to be developed and designed almost infinitely, or until the money begins to run out. On the other side, however, it represents this almost everlasting specter over the game's balancing team, and what it means to add in new content, develop new stuff, and of course, add all those shiny new characters and 7 stars and 27 stars and SSRs and all the other Rs that you can imagine. And some recent games I've been playing have been having a bit of a kind of a growing pains or a kind of like rubber meets the road moment when it comes to their Endgame or / Everest content. So the first one is Limbus Company. And Limbus has had quite a bit of an interesting back and forth between the fans and the balancing team. There's been a lot of divisive comments and arguments over Limbus Company in terms of where it should be going in terms of its difficulty. Now, if you're a Project Moon fan, then you know that they have made some incredibly hard games and hard content. Anyone who did Day 49 in Lamenting Corporation or the True Ending in La Aruna can certainly attest to that. With Limbus Company being both a story-driven game as well as a gacha game, they're kind of running into this wall of what does challenge look like in a game like Limbus Company. And the recent canto or chapter has brought with it kind of this like reignition of this discussion. And it all has to do with a lovely new mechanic, or that mechanic that was introduced, I believe, last canto, but has really gone in full display: red coins. So if you don't play Limbus Company, very quickly, you clash with enemies with skills, and each hit in the skills represented by a coin. Now, typically, if your skill beats the opponent's skill, they don't do anything to you. Your coins clash, you break their coins, and then you beat them up. Red coins trigger regardless. So you can win the clash, yes. The enemy can still punch you 2, 3, 4, 6 times in a row. And when bosses have this, it presents a very interesting situation where you beat the boss in the clash, and then he turns around and does about 400 damage to your entire party with his unclashable red coin mega combo. And that was kind of one of the bigger points as to the near the end boss fight of the recent chapter. And it threw a lot of people for a tizzy, because again, the point of beating the opponent at Clash is you're not supposed to take damage. And Limbus Company's been having this struggle in the last few seasons, or cantos, in terms of presenting content that is interesting to play, but is still providing like this bite or edge for expert players. And there's been solid arguments for like the last like months, 6, 7 months, or even to the last year, of having a dedicated expert mode for people who do want to play that. Because just as there are people who struggle with the content, there are those who manage to do it with their best teams. We see this gets at the heart of the balanced discussion when it comes to monetized games, whether they are gacha, live service, or some combination. If we're talking about a single player game, or even just a strictly free-to-play game, balance is pretty much left up to the designer's discretion. If they want to change a character that you spent $0.00 on, they can do that anytime that they want. And we have seen this in any hero shooter, multiplayer shooter, team-based game, whatever. That's kind of the whole point when we talk about kind of the esports style of characters receiving nerfs, buffs, things are changing, things are being added, removed, etc., etc. But when we're talking about games where this content comes with a price tag, it's a different story. So with Limbus Company, the best defense against red coins are IDs or characters who can dodge, because dodge doesn't trigger the red coins. You can just dodge all those attacks and they'll never hit you. That's great. Unfortunately, what's the chance that someone's going to have a full team that completely can counter that dodge mechanic? If you're a new player, probably 0%. And if you're a veteran player, you have a far greater chance. For me right now in Limbus Company, I think I have every ID except for 2 that I'm missing. And I can, with given enough time, I can level everyone up, rank them all up tie, blah, 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 and get them all powered up for any amount of content. But when we're talking about a game that features different modes of play, different designs of play like this, you have to be able to understand what is the content that everyone can do, what is the content that is meant for the endgame players. And the problem that Limbus Company has struggled with since its inception is that it's really not doing a good enough job of separating these two. They're trying to have their cake and eat it too in this approach, that as the story content gets developed, everything gets bumped up in terms of difficulty. The max level requirement goes up, new mechanics and rules are introduced, the boss fights become more challenging, and on one hand, that's great for the expert players. But if you don't have access to everything, if you don't have all the great bells and whistles, and you're just trying to go through the story, what's your recourse other than to spend lots and lots of money and try and get those really great characters from the banners? I personally think that Limbus Company needs to do 2 things. One, I do agree that I think there should be an expert mode, a hard mode, something, again, that is meant for the people who are wanting that extreme challenge, the ones who have every ID fully ranked up and fully uptied. I also think the game needs to start adding in summoning rewards for beating some of the cantos, that for a new player to try and catch up, and this is always a problem in any long-term character-focused live service game. The longer these games are, the more characters are introduced. The more characters get introduced, the more the pool that you have to go through in order to get them gets larger and larger. When you start playing a live service game or a gacha game and there's only 15 characters, and you know that 2 of them are really great, you have a 2 out of 15 chance of trying to get them. When there's 60, 80, 100, 200, 400 different characters and perks and all that other stuff, it's a lot harder to get those characters. And it's why, for a lot of character-driven monetized games, content needs to be designed with a very wide berth. You can't design something that requires exactly character 7, 15, 234, and 5. And if you don't have those exact combinations, you can't do that content. Keep that in the back of your mind, because it's going to be coming back up in a minute or 2. And a good example that we've talked about before is with the use of Arknights. That Arknight's design is very much explicitly capped in terms of how powerful characters can get, and that has not changed 1 iota over the years. And credit to the developers that they've resisted that temptation to, well, let's introduce Elite 3, and then Elite 4, and then we'll add in 7-star characters and 8-star characters. And I think I just gave the Arknights community a heart attack by saying those words. By keeping the content very much balanced around these very specific or strict numbers of power and grinding, or power and the power curve itself, I should say, it means that content can be done in a variety of ways. If you're lacking a meta character like a W Alter, you're not doomed. You can still do all the content in this game. It's going to be easier for you to do it, and yes, Arknights does have a power curve like all these games. The character I just mentioned, her archetype is supposed to be that they do nuke level damage to all ground units but can't hit air. Except her special 3 lets her hit all air units and nuke everybody on the field. And it's fine to have like that level of power if we're talking about a predominantly single-player game, or exclusively single-player versus the AI environment. And again, the game is not putting out content that says, did you pull W Alter? You can do this. If you don't have it, you're screwed, get lost. So with that, let's move on to the other game that's having trouble when it comes to endgame content, and that's Marvel Contest of Champions. that celebrated its 10-year anniversary last year. They have moved on to, or they're releasing it on Steam this year. It is a game with a lot of champions, over 300 now. It had multiple inventions of late game, endgame, Everest content, however you want to call it. And they're once again running into this problem. When you release content, or when you're trying to challenge players, you have to understand who is actively the audience for it. Are you targeting people who just made to the final progression curve? Are you targeting people with 10-year-old accounts? And you have to be really mindful, not only in terms of what that content means, but how it's going to reward someone for doing it. Their recent kind of progression or content gaffe is with what's called the Wheel of Fate challenge. So this is again, Everest level content that in it, you are limited not only by kind of specific tags that you have to bring in, but each of the boss fights has a strict list of champions that you are allowed to use. Not strict list of tags. It will literally say you can only use one of these 10 or 9 or even less than that champions, and that's it. Now again, keep in mind that this is a game where you have a counter system between the different classes of each champion, but then there are some champions who are explicitly designed to counter certain strategies or certain champions. So if the list to fight this champion doesn't include one of the champions that was kind of designed to fight them, it becomes a massive pain to do. And this is a massive pain for someone who could be playing this game for 5, 7, 8, 9 years and so on. And even the rewards that people are talking about, like for this level of content, it doesn't match kind of the amount of work that goes into it. And it once again presents this issue, and a very different issue than with Limbus Company. Contest of Champions has a lot of content for a lot of different skill levels and account levels. But when you're designing stuff, there has to be, again, this give and take of what we're expecting players to be able to do this, and what we're going to give players for accomplishing this. Their last bit of Everest content, the Epoch of Pain, was a really solid endgame content. It was something that I even managed to do where I've done one lane so far. It gives out some really important rewards, some great ways of pushing your account forward, and it's suitably challenging to do. This, from what people are saying, that by the time your account is good enough to even attempt it, the rewards aren't even going to matter. And this, again, to go back to Limbus Company for a second, is also where that issue lies. That Limbus Company's kind of final grand challenge is the Refraction Railway, which is not easy to say fast. But again, doing it doesn't quite reward anything substantial or new. The most original or the most unique thing you get out of that is a lovely little banner you can put on your profile picture. But here's again the problem. Let's say they did tie original 3-star or super powerful meta-breaking IDs to the Refraction Railway. People would be up in arms, and deservedly so. Because if you're tying something that is so powerful and so game-breaking to a mode that requires you to have everything to stand a chance, a lot of people aren't going to be happy. And with Limbus Company, the Refraction Railway changes every, I think it's 3 to 6 months, or even more than that, as the seasons go by. Now, Contest of Champions, like this kind of con that we talked about, it gets added to their kind of pool of Everest content. So it will be there until, who knows, when the sun dies 15 times, it will still be available. But when you start tying content to these rewards, there has to be an incentive to do it. And it's why you cannot just design whale content for whale players and that's it. Like, there's no carrot on the stick. There has to be something to get someone to do this stuff. Because otherwise, you're just basically saying, this content requires us to get your credit card information. So, is there an easy answer to this? And unfortunately, the answer is no, there isn't. As these games go on, as new content gets introduced, it will always push older stuff and even older rewards down. 4 or 5 years ago in Contest of Champions, 6-star champions was the high-end BN and all of that stuff. You get a full roster of 6 stars, you're good. Then they introduce 7 stars. And then everything else below that gets shuffled more and more down. When you do this, there has to be something for the player to go for. There has to be a reason to keep pushing. If you're just designing content for a smaller and smaller segment of your fan base, people aren't going to want to do that. And more importantly, they're going to feel like you're just kind of giving them the runaround. Hey, we want new stories, or we want something cool and interesting to do. We gotta wait another 6 to 12 months while you keep putting out the ultra 0.007% chance of winning content for the people who have, spent hundreds, thousands, even more on these games. And yes, for some of the higher end gacha and monetized games, you probably don't want to know how much money those games can bring in on a month-to-month basis. To begin to wrap things up, balance for a monetized game has to be handled very carefully. You cannot just keep messing with things. It's again why I think Arknights is one of the better balanced games in this respect. That they set their kind of end cap for how powerful a character can grow in terms of raw stats and numbers. And I think they did that within day 1 or month 1 of the game's original release. Whereas a lot of other live service games, again, Limbus Company, Kinds of Champions, and plenty of others, have kept raising the power curve. And if you raise the power curve, again, you have to balance that by raising the difficulty curve. Because if all your content is balanced around 3-star characters, or let's say 500 power characters, and now the new average is 2,000, 7,000, 15-star characters, you're going to get bored. And again, that is a fair thing that can happen. In one of the ones I played last year, that their whole thing was they got, as soon as they were starting to suffer, they switched completely to fan service. I started playing it just before they made that shift. It was a decent shooter in terms of kind of being a third-person shooter. The problem I ran into was, because it's a gacha game and you have, the highest rarity character, the highest rarity guns, you don't need to be worried about cover if you just walk into a room, hit ultimate, and everything melts in front of you. There's no real need to, hide behind a wall or a corner like in Tom Clancy's Division. Maybe if they ever do a Division 3, we'll get anime-level cutscenes and ultra-rare guns in that one. For Division fans out there, how do you feel about that inclusion? And again, there are people who they don't care about this content one way or they don't care about that power curve. They're there for the character collecting, for kind of the prestige of owning every character, every gun, sword, belt buckle, SSSSSSSSRRRR characters that you can think of. But that is always going to be a segment of a fraction of your consumer base. And the games that survive long term understand that content and new characters and new progression have to be available for everyone. And the second you start tying what the player can do to the amount of money they spent in the game is when people start to get very leery of continuing to play. Again, there is a difference between wanting to spend money because A, you support the game, or B, you really like the game so much that you want to get those little advantages even though they're not needed, versus having that feeling that if I don't spend, then I'm stuck. That there is no other avenue for me to move forward. Maybe after 5 years, 10 years, 20 years of playing, I'll get just enough resources to push up to that next level. Or I spend $100 and do it right now. But again, it's always a losing battle because $100 now, you'll probably have to spend that again when the next upgrade comes and the next star level and whatever else they add to keep pushing things. In one of the other ones I played for, this was 6-7 years ago, this was Marvel Strike Force. I was kind of trying to look into what's happening in the game right now, or kind of happening in the middle of 2025, And they had their own little player-based revolt with them adding in a new mechanism that once again is kind of designed to reward or even just put in a balance the super high level players. That if your party's like gear level is a certain level higher than the opposing player, you get innate advantages in combat. So what that essentially means is whoever has the most money to spend to get all the stuff as fully level as they can, even if their team is not meta breaking, it will still be able to destroy someone else who hasn't gotten all those items or hasn't spent enough money to get them. And the era that selling raw power in a live service game is past us. This was kind of what we began to see kind of in the late 2000s, early to mid 2010s, especially a lot of the less than reputable mobile and live service games. Today, again, there is an infinite number of gacha games, live service games, multiplayer fighting games, hero shooter, shooter heroes, and any other ones you can imagine out there. And everyone is just kind of waiting to see if the big name example is going to fail and falter. Because if they falter and they start burning fans, someone can easily come and say, hey, you like this game that got all bad and predatory and monetization? We're good right here. Come give us your money and our attention. And again, there will always be another gacha out there. There will always be another summoning banner, and other stars, and more U's, R's, and S's to add. So for those of you watching this, what do you think about good endgame content for a live service game? What should these games push for? What are good examples of kind of testing the player's skill, mastery, and even account progress? And where do you think it goes off the rails? Besides, again, the examples I mentioned with Marvel Kinds of Champions. So that I will let all you go, and let me know how many URs you've pulled by watching this video. That's going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to do the YouTubing stuff people tell you to do. If you're interested in more of my thoughts on design, check out my books wherever they are sold. Visit our Discord and Patreon, and come back for discussions on game design here, and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games.